Imagine stepping out to run an errand, maybe to a local hardware store, and suddenly federal agents jump out of an unmarked rental truck to detain people. I mean, it sounds like something from a spy thriller, doesn't it?
It really does.
But this is a chilling reality that reportedly unfolded right here at home in Los Angeles not too long ago. So today on this deep dive, we're going to unpack a really startling incident. We're talking about Border Patrol agents using, well, highly deceptive tactics, reportedly, to conduct an immigration raid.
And it immediately opens up this huge, critical conversation, really, about the boundaries of federal power.
Exactly. And your constitutional rights, unreasonable searches and seizures, that whole thing, plus the increasing militarization of domestic law enforcement. It makes you ask, how do we as citizens navigate this when the agency supposed to protect us might be, well, overstepping?
That's the core question.
We'll get into the legal fine print, look at some surprising tactics that really blur ethical lines, and what it all ultimately means for your privacy, your sense of safety. Okay, so let's unpack this story and dive into these complex layers. Federal authority versus individual rights.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here, I think, is how incidents like this one, which might seem isolated at first glance, they actually illuminate much broader patterns. Patterns in how laws are applied, how constitutional protections like the Fourth Amendment get interpreted on the ground.
Right. It's not just one event.
No, it's about understanding the underlying dynamics, the bigger picture.
That's a crucial point. So our mission today is to examine these recent events involving federal agencies, explore the legal frameworks, the operational tactics, the constitutional challenges that pop up when government power meets civil liberties. And we'll do this, like always, by looking straight at the source material, legal rulings, news reports, the actual facts available. Okay, let's set the scene. August 6, 2025, Westlake, Los Angeles. Accounts describe this dramatic Border Patrol operation near a Home Depot. Sources detail a raid where agents reportedly ambushed people using tactics. Well, they sound like covert ops. Jumping out of an unmarked Penske rental truck.
An actual Penske truck.
Yeah, and some agents were apparently disguised. One reportedly acted like a driver offering work in Spanish, only to ambush people when they tried to flee. The Border Patrol commander, Gregory Bovino, even reportedly called it Operation Trojan Horse.
Wow. And that detail about the Penske truck, that's quite telling. Penske, the company, they certainly reacted. They put out a statement saying they strictly prohibit putting people in the cargo area of their vehicle.
Makes sense.
Right. And they stress they were not made aware of this, didn't authorize their trucks being used like that, and plan to contact DHS to reinforce their policy. That shows a real level of concern from a private company about how its property was reportedly used.
Absolutely. And the controversies around this, they blew up pretty fast. Think about the reaction from Bill Asaley, the U.S. attorney for the area. Accounts say he promoted the raid on social media.
Oh.
Yeah, reportedly writing something like, "For those who thought immigration enforcement had stopped in Southern California, think again. Enforcement of federal law is not negotiable." Pretty strong words.
Definitely a strong stance.
But then you have advocacy groups immediately sounding the alarm. They pointed out that the government is actually under a specific court order restricting these kinds of raids in that region.
Ah, okay. So there's existing legal context.
Exactly. An order that explicitly prohibits arrests based on things like race, ethnicity, speaking Spanish, or just being somewhere or doing a certain job. And what's really striking is this raid reportedly happened nearly a month after a federal judge issued that very order. An order barring stops without reasonable suspicion and banning reliance on those discriminatory factors.
That timing is significant, and it gets more complicated. Federal officials, including Bovino, they faced accusations of, well, misleading the public about these sweeps. They reportedly claimed the targets were predetermined individuals with criminal records or people who'd assaulted officers.
Right, suggesting specific targets.
But then, records reviewed by different sources reportedly showed that many people detained actually had no prior criminal record at all. And adding to the lack of transparency, the agents involved reportedly wouldn't show their faces or give their names.
Which makes accountability almost impossible.
Pretty much. And you mentioned the tactics earlier. The comparison some sources made is quite jarring.
Yeah, the eerily similar description.
Exactly. Describing the tactics as eerily similar to methods reportedly used by groups like the White Nationalist Patriot Front, they apparently used a Penske van earlier that same summer in an attack on a pride parade, with members bursting out.
That comparison is disturbing. If law enforcement starts using tactics associated with extremist groups, I mean, what does that do to public trust? to the perception of their role.
That's the crux of it. That direct comparison, especially to groups linked with extremist actions, it really challenges the public's view of law enforcement methods. It creates this deeply uncomfortable parallel. And the pushback from advocates, it highlights this fundamental tension. How do you pursue safety goals while upholding civil liberties and maintaining community trust? It's a tough balance.
All these aggressive tactics really bring us to the key question. When federal agents do show up, maybe at your door, maybe elsewhere, what are your actual rights? How do you protect your privacy? It's something everyone should probably understand better.
Definitely. And at its heart, this is about the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. It safeguards your legitimate privacy interests, your persons, houses, papers, and effects, as it says, from unreasonable government invasions.
Unreasonable being the key word there.
Precisely. A search or seizure is unreasonable if you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the place or thing being searched.
So privacy is the core idea. But what's the mechanism? What enforces that against government intrusion?
The main mechanism is the warrant requirement. A fundamental piece of the Fourth Amendment is needing a judicial warrant. And that's not just any document. It has to be issued by a neutral magistrate, a judge.
Okay, a judge, not the agency itself.
Right. And it authorizes searches of areas where you have that reasonable expectation of privacy, your home, a locked briefcase, whatever. Warrants set proper boundaries and ensure lawful authority. It's a critical check on government power.
So think of your home, or even like a locked box you're carrying, as your private zone. The government can't just barge in without a really good reason and official permission from a court, right?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Now, it's also important to know there are exceptions. Courts have recognized situations where a warrant isn't needed right away.
Like what?
Well, the automobile exception is a big one. Cars are mobile, and the expectation of privacy is considered lower than in a home. Another is a search incident to a lawful arrest, usually limited to checking the person and the immediate area for weapons or evidence they might destroy right then and there.
Okay, so immediate circumstances matter.
They do. But crucially, this power doesn't usually extend to things already secured by police, far away from the arrest scene, unless there's still some immediate danger or risk. That distinction is key.
That makes sense. But the sources highlight something really important, especially thinking about that Home Depot raid. The difference between types of warrants, judicial versus administrative.
Yes, exactly. The National Immigration Law Center explains this clearly, and it's where a lot of confusion can happen. Judicial warrants or subpoenas are formal orders from a judicial court, a state or federal judge. These do authorize officers to make arrests, seize things, or search, and crucially, they must be complied with.
Okay, from a judge, you have to comply. Got it. What about the administrative ones, the ones from the agencies themselves?
Right. Administrative warrants or subpoenas are different. They're formal documents issued by a federal agency like DHS, ICE, CBP, USCIS. An immigration officer or immigration judge might sign one. But here's the critical part. Administrative warrants do not authorize a search.
Really? They don't authorize a search?
No. And administrative subpoenas, they have no immediate requirement for compliance unless a separate additional judicial court order compels it. So if an agent only shows you an administrative warrant or subpoena to get inside or get information, you can actually refuse. You can ask them to leave.
Wow. That distinction is huge. So why do agencies reportedly use these administrative warrants so often if they don't grant search power? It almost sounds like a tactic. Hoping you don't know the difference. The sources really flag this as a problem.
It's often described exactly like that, this idea of inducing consent, presenting an official-looking document, hoping the person doesn't understand their rights and just agrees. It's how agencies reportedly test the limits of the Fourth Amendment. It kind of chips away at rights through, lack of awareness.
That makes sense.
And this connects directly to a really important Supreme Court case, United States v. Chadwick from 1977. It clarifies the exact point.
Okay, tell me about Chadwick.
So, in Chadwick, federal agents arrested suspected drug traffickers. The suspects had a double-locked footlocker they believed held drugs. The agents seized the footlocker, took it to the federal building, and then about an hour and a half later, they opened it. No search warrant, no consent.
And what did the Supreme Court say?
The court said the search was unreasonable. Their reasoning was crucial. Once the agents had seized the footlocker and had it safely under their exclusive control, there was not the slightest danger it or its contents could be removed or destroyed.
So the immediate need was gone.
Exactly. The court also noted that someone's expectation of privacy in their personal luggage is substantially greater than in an automobile. So even though the police had custody of the footlocker, the privacy interests inside it remained protected. They needed a judicial warrant to look inside.
That's a really clear principle. It's not just legal jargon. It's a direct protection. Even if they seize something, they generally need that separate judicial check before searching it. Your privacy doesn't just vanish because it's in their hands. And this relates directly back to the claims about the Home Depot incident agents possibly searching without judicial warrants, or maybe implying they had authority when they only had administrative papers. It's a fundamental check on power.
Really?
Now, this specific raid with the van and the alleged deceptive tactics, it feels like part of a bigger story, doesn't it?
Right.
This whole conversation about the militarization of police.
It absolutely ties in. When we talk about police militarization, we mean the use of military equipment, things like armored vehicles, assault rifles, flashbangs, and military tactics by law enforcement. SWAT teams being used for routine warrants, for example.
Right.
It also includes intelligence gathering aimed at the public, at activists. Sources show this trend isn't brand new. It ramped up in the 50s to 70s with race riots, anti-war protests, then got another big boost from the war on drugs and later the war on terror.
And isn't there a specific federal program that really facilitated getting military gear to local police?
Yes, the 1033 program. Started under President George H.W. Bush in 1990. It basically mandates the transfer of surplus military equipment from the Department of Defense to local law enforcement agencies. It's been a huge factor in militarization.
So military-grade stuff ending up with local cops.
Exactly. Now, the Obama administration put some limits on those transfers in 2015, but then the Trump administration lifted those restrictions in 2017, so the flow of equipment picked up again.
Okay, so the gear is one thing. But what are the actual concerns? How does this impact communities on the ground?
Well, concerns come from across the political spectrum, actually. Groups like the Libertarian Cato Institute and the ACLU have both raised red flags. Studies reportedly suggest militarized policing doesn't actually make officers safer or reduce crime.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but that's what some research indicates. And worse, it's reportedly deployed more often in communities with large African-American populations, regardless of local crime rates. This can seriously damage police-community relations, fostering an us-versus-them mentality.
And the SWAT teams you mentioned.
Yeah, their use has exploded. SWAT teams were originally for very specific, high-risk things like hostage situations. But an ACLU study found 62% of SWAT deployments were for drug raids, often serving warrants, and almost 80% involved raids on private homes. Not exactly the rare, extreme scenarios they were designed for.
And beyond the gear and tactics, there's also the surveillance side, right? Expanding powers there, too.
Absolutely. Think about the Patriot Act after 9/11. It allowed sneak and peek searches, searching property without the owner's consent or even knowledge if terrorism was suspected. Critics argued that directly violates civil liberties, undermining the whole idea of notice that protects against unreasonable searches.
It paints a stark picture. From community policing to something that some people describe as feeling like an occupying force. The impact on civil liberties seems profound.
It really does. And it raises that difficult question again. How do we balance real security needs with the fundamental constitutional rights of individuals? And how does this shift affect trust, maybe making people feel less safe, not more?
And it's not just physical raids anymore. Agencies are pushing boundaries in the digital world, too. Some operations sound completely like spy novels, extending that Trojan Horse idea online.
That perfectly leads us to Operation Trojan Shield, part of a bigger thing called Operation Ironside. This was a massive international police sting running roughly 2018 to 2021. Involved the FBI, the Australian Federal Police, AFP, Europol, a major collaboration.
Okay, so what was the setup? How did this digital Trojan Horse work?
It was incredibly clever, almost audacious. Law enforcement covertly created and distributed a smartphone messaging app called ANOM, or AN0M. They marketed it within criminal networks as being supposedly secure.
Wait, they gave the criminals the secure app.
They did. They got it into the hands of groups like the Italian Mafia in Australia, Albanian organized crime, biker gangs, big drug syndicates. They built trust that this is a safe way to communicate.
But it wasn't.
Not at all. ANOM was the Trojan Horse, designed and run by the FBI and AFP so they could monitor every single message sent on the platform, every plot, every deal.
That's incredible. But hang on, what about the Fourth Amendment? If the FBI is reading messages, especially from U.S. folks.
That's where the clever and arguably controversial international workaround came in. The FBI reportedly felt they couldn't directly collect messages from U.S. users because of Fourth Amendment warrant requirements, so they partnered with the Australian Federal Police.
How did that help?
They had the AFP run the first server node outside the U.S., in a country where the legal protections, Australian law in this case, reportedly aren't the same as the Fourth Amendment regarding this kind of collection. The AFP apparently shared general info back with the FBI.
Okay.
Then later, they used something called a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, or MLA, basically agreements for countries to share legal evidence reportedly with Lithuania to get specific ANOM user data funneled back to the FBI from a server there. But importantly, messages from the U.S. were reportedly geofenced, blocked from FBI access within the U.S. itself. That's why they needed this complex international route.
Wow. Talk about playing the long game.
Yeah.
The criminals thought they had this secret channel, but it was a trap all along. The scale is just staggering.
The results were huge. On June 8, 2021, they executed coordinated raids worldwide. Over 800 arrests across 16 countries. They seized massive amounts, almost 40 tons of drugs, hundreds of guns, luxury cars, over $48 million in cash and crypto.
A huge blow to organized crime, clearly.
Definitely. It shows the power of sophisticated digital surveillance. But, as you can imagine, it also raises serious questions about legality and ethics. Funneling data through other countries to potentially bypass domestic constitutional rules? Sources say legal challenges have already started, particularly in Australia.
So these operations, whether it's unmarked vans on the street or covert apps online, they're constantly pushing and reshaping the boundaries of privacy and government oversight for all of us. What's possible and what's actually permissible. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We started with that controversial Home Depot raid, the aggressive tactics, the deception. Then we unpacked the crucial differences between judicial warrants, the ones you have to obey, and administrative warrants, which you often don't.
Which is such a key piece of knowledge for people to have.
Absolutely. Then we looked at the bigger picture, the complex evolution of policing, the trend towards militarization, and what that means for communities. And finally, we jumped into the high-tech world of digital stings like Operation Trojan Shield.
And throughout all of this, I think the core takeaway is seeing that constant dynamic tension. Law enforcement trying to ensure public safety on one side, and on the other, the essential constitutional protections for individual liberty and privacy, especially the Fourth Amendment.
Right. And understanding these details, these nuances about federal powers and your rights, it feels more critical than ever in a world where technology is always changing the game, always redrawing the lines of what's private. So maybe the final thought is this. These lines of privacy, they aren't just being redrawn by judges. They're being redrawn by every new tactic, every new technology. Law enforcement adopts from those unmarked vans to sophisticated Trojan Horse apps.
That's a powerful way to put it.
As technology keeps advancing, as new threats emerge, how do we as a society make sure the tools used by law enforcement stay within the bounds of a free society? How do we ensure they don't become instruments that actually erode the very freedoms they're supposed to protect? What stands out to you about these ongoing challenges? How does just being aware become maybe the first line of defense?